My name is Allie Collier. I'm 38 years old, and I'm a captain in United States Army Intelligence. I was standing in my father's marble-clad kitchen in Fairfax, Virginia, trying to breathe in the Thanksgiving scent of roasting turkey instead of the suffocating tension. My 5-year-old son, Leo, was giggling as his grandfather, Colonel Robert Collier, lifted him into the air. And that's when my secure phone vibrated. It was my husband, Mark. His voice was cold and clipped, stripped of all emotion. Allie, listen carefully. Get Leo and get out of there. Extract now. I started to ask why, but he cut me off. No time, go. 5 minutes later, sitting in my car at a red light, I checked the glove compartment out of pure instinct. Inside was a flash drive. Next to it, a handwritten note from Mark. If I don't make contact, don't trust anyone, not even your father. They didn't know that Mark had copied everything. They didn't know he had given it to me. If you've ever been backstabbed by your own family over money, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. And hit that like button, because this is a story about the devastating truth that hides behind the closed doors of the perfect American family. The air in my father's house always smelled of money and power, but today, for Thanksgiving, it was masked by something more wholesome. The rich, savory scent of roasting turkey mingled with the sweet spice of cinnamon and nutmeg from a pumpkin pie, cooling on the granite countertop. It was a perfect scent for a perfect family portrait, the kind you see in catalogs for high-end furniture. The sprawling colonial home in Fairfax with its gleaming hardwood floors and marble-faced fireplace was the stage, and we were all playing our parts. I stood by the kitchen island, a silent observer. In the living room, my father, retired Marine Colonel Robert Collier, swirled amber liquid in a heavy crystal glass. Next to him, my older brother Daniel, the golden boy, did the same. They were deep in conversation about Collier Consulting, the family's lucrative defense consulting firm. Their voices were a low hum of contract numbers and fourth-quarter projections. They were gods in their own universe, and I was merely a satellite who had drifted into their orbit for the holiday. They'd barely acknowledged me when I arrived, offering a curt, Allie, before their attention was immediately captured by my son. Leo! There's my little champion, my father had boomed, sweeping him up into his arms. Daniel ruffled his hair. They loved Leo, or at least, they loved the idea of him. The continuation of the Collier name. I, on the other hand, was just the vessel that had delivered him. I told myself I was only here for Leo, to give him a relationship with his grandfather and uncle. It was the lie I repeated every year. But deep down, a part of me, the part that never grew up, still yearned for a single word of approval from my father. A sign that my life, my career as an Army intelligence officer, meant something more to him than a strange, unfeminine hobby. It never came. Suddenly, a sharp vibration against my hip cut through the thick atmosphere. Not my personal iPhone, but the burner-like, no-frills device the Army issued me. My family called it my spy toy, an unwelcome piece of my other life, the one they didn't respect, intruding on their perfect Thanksgiving. I slipped out of the kitchen and into the quiet, formal hallway. The caller ID read Mark. Allie, he said, his voice flat, stripped of all emotion. It was his field voice, the one that meant things were bad. Mark, what is it? Is everything okay? Listen carefully, he said, his words fast and precise. Get Leo and get out of there. Extract now. The term extract sent a spike of ice through my veins. It wasn't a word a civilian used. It was a command. My training flooded the rising panic, replacing it with cold, sharp clarity. My heart hammered against my ribs, but my voice came out steady. Mark, what's happening? No time, he repeated, and the line went dead. For a moment, I just stood there, the dead phone in my hand, the cheerful sounds from the living room feeling like they were from another planet. Then, I moved. My mind was already running drills, calculating threats. I smoothed my expression into one of mild annoyance, tucked the secure phone away, and walked back to the edge of the living room. My father was now showing Leo his collection of military medals displayed in a glass case. Look, buddy, this one's for valor. I forced a smile. Oh, shoot, I said, making my voice light. I think Leo spilled his juice box all over my jacket in the car. It's probably getting sticky. I better go grab it, Daniel snorted. Always so organized, Allie. I ignored him, walking over and gently taking Leo's hand. Come on, sweetie, help mommy for a second. My father turned, his gaze unreadable. It was a look I knew well, the colonel's assessment. For a split second, I felt like a raw recruit under inspection. His eyes followed me as I scooped Leo into my arms, his small body a warm, trusting weight against my chest, and walked toward the front door without looking back. The cold November air hit me as I stepped outside. In the driver's seat of my practical, reliable Honda Accord, a car so different from the gleaming BMW and Mercedes in the driveway, my hands trembled slightly as I buckled Leo into his car seat. We're playing a new game, buddy, I whispered, my voice strained. A quiet game. I started the engine, the familiar hum a small comfort. My training, my instincts, screamed at me. Mark's call wasn't a warning, it was an order. Something was already in motion. And then I remembered something he'd said to me last week, a casual comment while packing a go bag for one of his own investigations. Just in case, I put a little something for you in the glove compartment. Insurance. My breath hitched. My fingers fumbled with the latch. The glove compartment clicked open. Inside, nestled next to the owner's manual and a spare pack of tissues, was a small black flash drive. And beside it, a folded piece of paper. Mark's familiar, hurried script. 4 words that shattered my world. Not even your father. The air left my lungs. Not even my father. Colonel Robert Collier, the decorated hero. The man whose honor was the bedrock of our family's identity. The man whose approval I had chased my entire life. The note wasn't just a warning. It was a confirmation of a terrifying, unspoken fear I'd buried for decades. The feeling that something was fundamentally wrong beneath the perfect surface of the Collier family. My father wasn't the fortress protecting us. He was the threat. I slammed the glove compartment shut, my knuckles white. Pulling out of the long tree-lined driveway, I didn't speed. I drove normally, another suburban mom running an errand on Thanksgiving. But inside, I was a soldier behind enemy lines. I merged onto I-66, heading west, away from Fairfax. Away from the house. My mind raced, trying to piece together a puzzle without any of the edge pieces. What did Mark find? What did it have to do with my father? About 5 miles down the highway, it happened. It wasn't a loud, fiery explosion like in the movies. It was a dull, resonant thump that I felt more in my chest than heard with my ears. My eyes shot to the rearview mirror. In the distance, rising above the autumn tree line, in the exact direction of my father's house, was a thick plume of dark gray smoke. It wasn't a gas leak. It wasn't an accident. My intelligence brain knew exactly what it was looking at. That was a controlled, deliberate blast. This was sanitation. A cleanup. They were destroying records, evidence, something they needed gone. And they were using the holiday as cover. And as I pressed my foot on the accelerator, putting more distance between that column of smoke and my son, a chilling certainty settled in my gut. They had just destroyed something. And my God, they could include my own father. My father? No. Mark had to be wrong. But then why? Why did a part of me, a deep wounded part, believe every single word he said? I drove without a destination, the Honda eating up the dark miles of Virginia interstate while Leo slept peacefully in the back. The plume of smoke had long since vanished from my rearview mirror, but its image was burned into my mind. Each mile I put between us and that house felt less like an escape and more like a journey backward in time. The question wasn't just what was happening now, it was why a part of me wasn't surprised. Why Mark's horrifying warning, not even your father, felt less like a revelation and more like a key turning in a lock that had been rusted shut for decades. The truth is, the evidence against my father had been accumulating my whole life. I just never had the courage to read it. My mind drifted, pulled back 21 years. I'm 17, sitting across from my father in his mahogany-paneled office. The room was a shrine to the Marine Corps and the Collier legacy. Medals, plaques, a photo of him with a senator. I had just told him my dream. I wanted to go to West Point. I had the grades, the athletic record, the unwavering desire to serve. I laid it all out for him, my heart pounding with a desperate hope for his approval. He leaned back in his leather chair, a slow, condescending smile spreading across his face. He didn't just smile, he laughed. A short, sharp sound that cut the air and my hope right in two. West Point, he chuckled, as if I'd just told him I wanted to be a circus clown. Allison, that's not for Collier women. Collier men lead. Your brother Daniel, he'll take over the company one day. That's his duty. He gestured vaguely, as if my entire future was an afterthought. You just need to find a good husband. That's your path. He said it so casually, as if he were commenting on the weather. He had laid out my entire life's purpose in a single sentence, and it had nothing to do with who I was or what I wanted. I was not a leader. I was not a soldier. I was a daughter. An accessory to the family name, whose only function was to make a respectable match. The cold dismissal in his eyes that day became the first major crack in the foundation of my world. The memories kept coming, layered one on top of the other like geological strata of disappointment. I remembered a dinner just last year. We were at a high-end steakhouse in Tyson's Corner, the kind of place where deals were made over $1,000 bottles of wine. By then, I was Captain Allie Collier. I'd served 2 tours. I managed intelligence assets worth millions. I knew my job. And my intelligence work had flagged a new subcontractor Collier Consulting was about to partner with in the Middle East. I knew they were dirty. I had seen the reports. I tried to warn them, speaking in quiet, measured tones across the white tablecloth. Dad, Daniel, you need to be careful with this group. Their financials are suspect, and their political ties are complicated. Daniel waved his hand dismissively, a shiny fork glinting under the chandelier. He didn't even look at me. Allie, please, let's leave the business to the adults, okay? He smirked, taking a sip of his wine. You should get back to your son. I'm sure he misses you. The insult was twofold. My professional expertise was childish, and my primary role was, and always would be, motherhood. I looked to my father, expecting him, as a fellow military officer, to at least hear me out, to see the value in my intelligence. He remained silent. He just took a slow, deliberate cut of his filet mignon. His silence was louder than Daniel's scorn. It was an endorsement. My career, my uniform, my sacrifices. In their world, it was all just a cute little hobby. My hands tightened on the steering wheel, my knuckles white. But the memory that truly twisted the knife, the one that made my throat close up even now, was from 5 years ago. My mother's cancer. It was aggressive, merciless. I was stationed in Germany at the time. When the call came that she had weeks, not months, I didn't hesitate. I used every day of my accumulated leave and got on the first flight to Dulles. For the next 3 weeks, I lived at her bedside. Daniel was swamped with meetings, always trying to land a new partner. My father was on critical business trips, saving the company, so it was me. I was the one who held the cup to her chapped lips, who bathed her when she was too weak to move, who read to her until my voice was hoarse, and who held her frail hand as she took her last, shuddering breath. I was there for all of it. The ugly, the painful, the sacred. I was the only one. At the funeral, the hypocrisy was suffocating. Person after person came up to my father to praise his devotion. You were such a wonderful husband to her, Robert. He would nod gravely, a portrait of dignified grief. I watched him from across the room, standing next to Daniel. I saw him clap my brother on the shoulder, his voice low but clear enough for me to hear over the somber organ music. You handled everything so well, son. You really carried the weight for all of us. The injustice of it stole my breath. It was a complete erasure. My sacrifice, my pain, my final moments with my mother. They didn't exist. The golden boy, who had barely visited, was praised for carrying a weight I had borne all alone. If you have ever been the one to do all the work, only to watch someone else get all the credit, please support this story by hitting the like button and typing "I see you" in the comments. Because on that day, I felt completely invisible, and that's when I finally understood. Mark saw me. He was the only one who ever truly did. He saw the strength my father dismissed as stubbornness. He saw the intelligence my brother mocked as a hobby. He saw the pain I hid behind my uniform. I remember a few months ago, he'd been in my father's office and had glanced at some quarterly reports left on the desk. He didn't say much, just frowned. "Their accounting is creative," was all he'd muttered. He saw the rot then, the same way he saw everything else I was conditioned to ignore. His warning, ringing in my ears now as I drove through the night, wasn't paranoia. It wasn't a mistake. It was the truth. A brutal, ugly truth I had spent 38 years of my life trying not to see. I've been running my whole life, running from their judgment, running towards an approval I would never get. Now, I have to stop running. I have to turn around and face it. I have to find the truth. I owe that to my mother. The memories of the past fueled me, turning grief and resentment into cold, hard resolve. I drove south on I-95, putting more and more miles between my son and the life that had just tried to erase me. Fairfax was a ghost in the rearview mirror. My objective now was simple: disappear. Become a ghost myself. An hour outside of Richmond, I saw what I was looking for. A faded sign for a Sleep Well motel. The kind of anonymous, off-the-highway place that truckers used for a few hours of sleep and no one ever remembered. A true no-tell motel. Before checking in, I made 2 stops. First, a CVS for children's Tylenol, apple juice, and a box of goldfish crackers. The holy trinity of calming down a stressed-out 5-year-old. Second, a dimly lit pawn shop that smelled of dust and desperation. I walked out with a scuffed, older model Dell laptop and $150 less in my wallet. Everything was paid for in cash, from the dwindling emergency stash I kept in my car. I was leaving no digital trail. At the motel office, I signed the register as Jane Smith. The man behind the plexiglass didn't even look up from his crossword puzzle. He slid a key across the counter, and that was that. Our room was on the ground floor, at the far end, with a parking spot right outside the door and a clear view of the highway exit. Perfect. Inside, the room smelled of stale cigarette smoke and industrial cleaner. Before I even took my jacket off, my training kicked in. I did a quick sweep, checking behind the flimsy art on the walls, under the beds, in the phone jack, looking for anything that didn't belong. I checked the window lock and confirmed the bathroom had a second exit route through a small, high window if necessary. Only then did I allow myself to breathe. Leo, bless his heart, was starting to get scared. His lower lip trembled as he looked around the grim little room. "Mommy, I don't like this place. It's yucky. I want to see Daddy." I knelt down in front of him, forcing a bright, reassuring smile onto my face while my insides twisted into knots. This was the hardest part. The soldier could handle the threat, but the mother was breaking. "I know, sweetie. Hey, remember how Daddy sometimes plays those fun hide-and-seek games for his job? Well, this is one of those. A super secret one. Our job is to be the best hiders ever until he gives us the signal. Can you do that for me? Can you be my super secret agent?" His eyes widened, the fear replaced by a flicker of excitement. "Like a spy?" "Exactly like a spy," I said, hugging him tight. I got him settled in the cleaner of the 2 beds with his juice and crackers and turned on the old TV to a cartoon channel. Once his attention was fixed on a talking sponge, I went to work. I set up the old Dell on the rickety laminate desk, the dial-up modem screeches of its startup a sound from another era. I plugged in the flash drive. As I expected, it was a fortress. Mark had layered the encryption, a military-grade protocol, then a custom algorithm he'd designed himself. It was his way of protecting me, of making sure only I could get in. Peeling back the layers felt like a conversation with my husband. Every password was a date, a name, an inside joke only we would know. Our anniversary. The name we almost chose for Leo. The terrible street name of our first apartment. With each correct entry, another wall came down. It was the most heartbreaking love letter I'd ever received. After 20 minutes of intense concentration, the final barrier fell. A single folder appeared on the screen. It was labeled Project Ephesus. My heart pounded. I expected to find weapons schematics, illegal arms deals, something tied to my father's defense work. But it wasn't that. I clicked open the first file. It was a legal document, a revised last will and testament for my mother, dated just 3 months before she died, notarized by a name I didn't recognize. This version left her entire personal fortune, her family inheritance that was separate from my father's money in a trust managed exclusively by Daniel, to be used for the family's best interests. My name was nowhere on it. I clicked on the next file. It was a spreadsheet detailing a series of offshore wire transfers, routing money from Collier Consulting's pension fund into a shell corporation in the Cayman Islands. A corporation registered to Daniel Collier, millions of dollars, stolen from their own employees. The final document was a memo, outlining a strategy for a hostile takeover of my mother's assets upon her death, leveraging the fake will to absorb everything into the primary Collier estate, effectively and legally stealing my inheritance. Project Ephesus wasn't about national security. It was a meticulous, cold-blooded plan to rob a dying woman and disinherit her only daughter. A wave of nausea washed over me. I pushed back from the desk, my hands shaking. To distract myself, I unmuted the TV. The local Richmond news, WTVR6, was on. And then I froze. My father's face filled the screen. He was standing in front of the smoking ruins of our family home in Fairfax, his arm in a sling, a light bandage on his hand. He looked directly into the camera, his face a mask of carefully crafted sorrow. "We are just devastated," he said, his voice thick with fake emotion. "It appears to have been a tragic gas leak accident. We thank God that my daughter and grandson had just stepped out moments before. We are just grateful everyone is safe." Liar. My stomach turned. There was no grief in his eyes. There was only cold, hard calculation. He was controlling the narrative, setting the stage. And I knew, with sickening certainty, what that explosion was for. His home office. The place where decades of paper records, the original copies of my mother's real will, the hard copies of the pension fund statements, were all stored. He hadn't just destroyed a house. He had torched a crime scene. My fingers, trembling, moved the mouse to the last file in the folder. It was a simple text document named Contacts. My blood ran cold as I read the names. It wasn't a list of generals or senators. It was Mr. Abernathy, our family lawyer since I was a child. It was Cynthia Shaw, the chief accountant at Collier Consulting for 20 years, and Judge Martin Reeves, a local Fairfax County judge and a golfing buddy of my father's. Next to each name, Mark had added a single, chilling note. "Belongs to Robert." It all clicked into place. The fake will, the illegal money transfers, the public deception. It was all possible because he didn't just have a plan. He had an army of accomplices, people we had trusted our entire lives. My father hadn't just stolen from me. He had bought and paid for the entire system to make it legal. I stared at the list of names, the evidence of his betrayal glowing on the cheap laptop screen. He had built a cage around me my entire life, and I had only just realized I was in it. I stared at the evidence. And then the phone rang. A cheap, buzzing sound from the nightstand. My secure phone, an unknown number. The cheap phone buzzed violently against the nightstand, a jarring, angry sound in the dead quiet of the motel room. My gaze was still locked on the laptop screen, on the list of traitors Mark had compiled, an unknown number. My training told me not to answer. My gut, twisted with a sickening premonition, told me I had to. I picked it up, my hands slick with sweat. I didn't say anything. I just listened. For a moment, there was only static. Then, a voice that was as familiar to me as my own heartbeat filled the line. My father. But this wasn't the cold, calculating colonel from the TV screen. This was the voice of a concerned father, dripping with practiced warmth and anxiety. "Allie, oh thank God, Allie, where are you? We've been worried sick." I remained silent, my knuckles white on the phone. My eyes flickered to Leo, who was still asleep, his face peaceful and innocent. "Listen to me, honey." My father's voice continued, a perfect imitation of paternal love. You and Leo are safe. That's all that matters. There's been a terrible incident at the house. But that's not the worst of it. He paused, letting the dramatic silence hang in the air. Allie, it's Mark. He did this. The explosion, the mess at the company, all of it. He's under federal investigation for embezzlement. The sheer audacity of it was like a physical blow. It knocked the wind out of me. He was taking the exact truth, the crime he had committed, and pinning it perfectly onto Mark. It was brilliant. It was monstrous. It was gaslighting perfected into an art form. My throat was too tight to speak. Are you there, Allie? He pressed, his concern sharpening into impatience. Here, your brother wants to talk to you. Before I could protest, the phone was handed off, and Daniel's voice, sharp and laced with a lifetime of contempt, spat into my ear. Allie, what the hell are you doing? Have you lost your mind? Are you seriously on the run with that two-bit federal agent, that criminal? The word criminal ignited a hot surge of fury in my chest. I still couldn't speak, but my grip on the phone tightened until the plastic creaked. He set up the company, Allie. Daniel's voice rose, shrill and accusatory. He planted evidence, caused the explosion to cover his tracks, and now he's dragged you into it. The police are looking for you. They think you're an accomplice. Do you have any idea what you're doing to the Collier name? To this family? You are destroying everything Dad has built. You stupid, stupid girl. There it was. Stupid. The word he had used on me since we were children. The word that always made me feel small, incompetent, worthless. The accusation that I, the black sheep, was once again the source of the family's shame. Every word was a carefully chosen weapon, designed to hit a nerve, to trigger a lifetime of insecurity. Then the phone was snatched back. My father's smooth, authoritative voice returned, a balm after Daniel's acid. It was a classic interrogation tactic. One bad cop, one good cop. Daughter, listen to me now, he said, his tone softening, pleading. Daniel is upset, we all are. But you need to listen to your father. Mark has deceived you. He twisted things, made you believe these lies because he was cornered. He's the traitor, Allie, not us. He's a desperate man. He let that sink in before delivering the final, master stroke. Come home, honey. Just bring Leo and come home. I'll fix this. I can protect you. I'll get the lawyers. I'll clear your name. I will make this right. You have to stop trusting him. He paused, and his next words were a direct echo of Mark's warning, twisted into the ultimate tool of manipulation. You have to trust your father. You'll always be my daughter. He hung up. The silence that followed was deafening. The room felt small, the air thick and unbreathable. I was shaking, a violent tremor that started in my hands and spread through my whole body. Everything in me screamed that he was lying. The evidence was right here, glowing on this cheap laptop screen. Spreadsheets, legal documents, Mark's meticulous notes, cold, hard, undeniable facts. My training, my instincts, my own eyes were all telling me the same thing. My father was a thief and a liar. And he was trying to frame my husband to save himself. But that voice, his voice, the voice of Colonel Robert Collier, the voice that had commanded respect on battlefields and in boardrooms, the voice that had defined my world, that had set the standards I always failed to meet, the voice that, for 38 years, had been the ultimate authority on truth and honor in my life. It was a voice that was ingrained in my DNA, hardwired into my subconscious, and for one terrifying, paralyzing second, I doubted everything. Was I wrong? Could Mark, my quiet, steady Mark, be capable of such a monstrous deception? Had I been a fool, manipulated by the man I loved? Was my father, despite everything, telling the truth? Was he just a father trying to protect his family from a threat I was too blind to see? The screen glowed in the dark room. On one side, the digital proof of my father's crimes. On the other, the echo of his voice in my head, a lifetime of conditioning pulling me back into the fold, telling me to obey, to trust, to be a good daughter. It was an impossible choice, believe the evidence of my own mind or believe the man who had shaped it. The conflict was a physical agony, a tearing sensation in my chest. And in that moment, I understood how they had controlled me my entire life. Not with fists, but with this insidious poison of doubt, this warping of reality that made me question my own sanity. But then, the image of my mother's tired face in that hospital bed flashed in my mind. The memory of my father's cold words at her funeral. The sting of their dismissal, over and over and over again. They were lying. The spell broke. The doubt evaporated, replaced by a certainty so cold and pure it felt like ice solidifying in my veins. Everything they had just said was a lie. Every word was a performance. I couldn't trust my father. I couldn't go home. I had to trust the flash drive. I had to trust the man who had given it to me. I had to trust Mark. And I knew, with absolute clarity, that I couldn't do this alone. I was outgunned and isolated. I needed to find an ally. Now. The silence after that phone call was a suffocating blanket of dread. I was an island, and the sharks were circling. My father's words echoed in my head, a venomous whisper of doubt. I had the evidence, but I was alone, and they were powerful. I needed an ally. I needed a sign. I needed something more than just my own fractured conviction. As if summoned by my desperation, the screen of the cheap laptop flickered. A notification popped up in the corner. You have one new message. It was an encrypted email client Mark had installed, a ghost program that only activated under specific triggers. My hands trembling, I opened it. The message was simple, direct, and clearly prearranged by Mark for this exact contingency. Allie, it read. If you're reading this, you're in doubt. Go to her. She'll know what to do. Dead drop. Arlington Storage, Locker 47. The key is in the usual place. Below the message was a name that meant nothing to me. Evelyn Reed, Askies. And an address for a law office in Arlington. Mark had a plan. He always had a plan. Hope, sharp and painful, pierced through the fear. First thing was Leo. I couldn't bring him with me. I drove north, back towards the danger zone, my eyes scanning every car in the rearview mirror. My destination was a small townhouse in Alexandria, the home of Sarah, a fellow Army captain I'd served with in Afghanistan. She was a single mom, tough as nails, and one of the few people on earth I would trust with my son's life. When I explained, leaving out the details but conveying the urgency, she didn't ask questions. She just pulled me into a fierce hug and then scooped up a sleepy Leo. He's safe with me, Allie, she said, her eyes firm. Go, raise hell. Leaving him was the hardest thing I'd ever done, a physical tearing in my chest, but I knew it was the only way. Next, Arlington Storage. The usual place was a magnetic key holder tucked deep inside the rear wheel well of my car. Inside the cold, sterile hallway of the storage facility, I found Locker 47. The key turned smoothly. Inside was not a weapon or cash, but a small, heavy, old-fashioned brass key. A key to a safety deposit box. An hour later, I was standing outside a modest brick building in Arlington. The name, Evelyn Reed, attorney at law, etched on a simple brass plaque. This was it. I took a deep breath and walked in. The woman behind the desk was not what I expected. She was maybe 70, with sharp blue eyes, a cloud of unapologetic white hair, and the stern, no-nonsense look of my Irish grandmother. She looked up from a stack of papers, her gaze piercing. She knew who I was before I even said my name. Allison Collier, she said, her voice raspy but strong. I've been waiting for you. I just stared, confused. You have. Your mother, Catherine, was a smart woman, Evelyn said, gesturing to the chair in front of her desk. Smarter than your father ever gave her credit for. She knew this day might come. Evelyn's office felt like a safe harbor, filled with books, the scent of old paper, and Earl Grey tea. She came to me a year before she passed. Robert was already pressuring her to sign over her personal assets. She refused. Instead, she had me set up a secret trust fund. For you and Leo. She slid a single piece of paper across the desk. She knew he would try to take everything from you the moment she was gone. She wanted to make sure you had a way out. My eyes blurred with tears as I looked at the document. My mother had known. She had seen the rot in my father, the greed in my brother, and she had built me a lifeboat. Evelyn slid the heavy brass key I'd found toward me. This is for her safety deposit box at the bank down the street. She left something else for you in there. Something more important than money. The bank vault was cold and silent. The teller left me alone in the small private viewing room. My hands shook as I unlocked the long metal box and lifted the lid. Inside, resting on a stack of official-looking trust documents, was a single, sealed envelope of heavy cream-colored stationery. My mother's elegant, familiar handwriting was on the front. For my Allie. With trembling fingers, I tore it open. The letter inside was dated just weeks before she died. My dearest Allie, if you are reading this, it means I am gone, and the world has shown you the face I always feared it would. Please, listen to my words now. Never, not for 1 second, let your father or your brother define your worth. Their world is built on money and reputation, but yours is built on something true. Honor, strength, and a courage they could never understand. You are not a disappointment. You are a captain in the United States Army. You are a mother. You are my finest, most beautiful legacy. They will try to make you feel small because your light exposes their darkness. Do not let them. This money is yours. It is your freedom. Use it to build your own life, not the one they demand you live. Know that I see you. I've always seen you. And I have never been more proud. All my love. Maman. A sob escaped my throat, a sound I had held back for 5 long years. I pressed the letter to my chest, the paper absorbing my tears. It was the validation I had spent a lifetime craving. It was permission to fight back. It was my mother's love, reaching across death to arm me for the battle ahead. When I returned to Evelyn's office, my eyes red but my spine straight, she had a duffel bag waiting for me. One more thing, she said gently. Your husband dropped this off 2 days ago. He said you'd know what to do with it. My heart leaped into my throat. Mark. He was alive. I unzipped the bag. Inside was a second, identical flash drive and a small digital audio recorder. I pressed play. Mark's voice filled the quiet office, strained and breathless, but unmistakably him. Allie, it's me. I love you. Listen, there's no time. Your father is purging everything. It's worse than we thought. He and Daniel have been embezzling from the Collier Consulting Employee Pension Fund for years. The explosion at the house, that was to destroy the paper trail. They think I have the master files. They're hunting me. Don't believe a word your father says. He's trying to frame me. The recording crackled. There's an FBI agent I trust, Agent Lewis, Financial Crimes Division. Give him everything. He's waiting for your call. Allie, I know you can do this. I love you. The recording cut out, but it was enough. It was everything. It was the final, irrefutable proof. My mother's warning, Mark's evidence, his voice. It was a shield of truth around me. I zipped up the bag, my movements now calm and deliberate. The fear was gone, burned away by a clean, righteous anger. I looked at Evelyn, the woman my mother had trusted to be my guardian angel. Thank you, I said, my voice steady for the first time in 24 hours. She simply nodded. Now go give them hell, Captain. I walked out of that office not as a victim on the run, but as a soldier with a mission. I had money, I had evidence, I had my mother's truth. Now I would no longer be silent. Hiding was over, running was over. Armed with my mother's blessing and my husband's evidence, I was ready to stop reacting and start acting. I sat in my car in a quiet Arlington parking lot, the engine off, and dialed my father's number. He answered on the first ring. Allie, he said, his voice a smooth cocktail of relief and authority. You made the right choice. Where are you? I'll meet you, I said, my voice low and even, betraying none of the furious energy coursing through my veins. Alone. In 1 hour. Where? I chose the location carefully, turning his own hypocrisy against him. The old post chapel at Fort Myer, the one you took me to every Sunday when I was a child. I let the symbolism of it hang in the air between us, a place of God, of honor, of truth. Just you, Dad, no one else. I'll be there, he said, and hung up. He thought I was coming to surrender. He had no idea I was coming to fight. The chapel was exactly as I remembered it, smelling of old wood, lemon polish, and faint incense. Sunlight streamed through the stained glass windows, painting the empty pews in jewels of red and blue. It was quiet, a hollow, sacred silence. It was the perfect place to bury a lifetime of lies. He was already there, standing near the altar, his back to me. Dressed in a perfectly tailored suit, he looked every bit the distinguished military legend. But when he turned, he wasn't alone. Daniel stood beside him, his arms crossed, a smug, impatient look on his face. Of course. My father never went anywhere without his loyal soldier. It wasn't a meeting, it was an ambush. They hadn't come for reconciliation, they had come for the flash drive. You're late, Daniel sneered as I walked down the center aisle, my footsteps echoing in the cavernous space. You brought your attack dog, I see, I said, stopping a safe distance from them. That's enough, my father commanded, his voice sharp. This foolishness ends now, Allison. Give me the drive. Daniel took a menacing step forward. Just hand it over, Allie. Don't make this any harder than it has to be. For you, or for your son. The threat, so casually delivered, hung in the sanctified air. He was threatening Leo, my son, in a house of God. The last thread of my restraint began to fray. I met my father's gaze. It was cold, devoid of any warmth, any fatherly affection. It was the gaze of a man assessing a tactical problem. He stepped forward, his shadow falling over me. His voice was no longer pretending to be concerned. It was pure, undiluted ice. Daughter, he began, the word a mockery on his lips. You have always been a disappointment. From the very beginning. Your mother, God rest her soul, she was too soft on you. She let you indulge your fantasies. His eyes swept over me, a look of utter disdain on his face. Chasing that cheap little army career of yours, playing soldier, when your duty, your real duty, was to this family. To its name, to its legacy. He gestured between himself and Daniel. Mark is the same, a failure who couldn't cut it in the real world, so he attached himself to you, to us. Two failures, dragging the Collier name through the mud. He extended his hand, palm up. Now, give me the flash drive. Be a good daughter for once in your life, and I can clean up this mess. You were never equipped to understand the bigger picture. Disappointment. Cheap career. Failure. The bigger picture. Every word was a poisoned dart, the summary of a lifetime of his judgment. And in that moment, something inside me didn't just break. It vaporized. The years of pent-up pain, of silent resentment, of desperate yearning for his approval, all of it vanished, replaced by a clarity so absolute it was blinding. The last straw had been laid, and the weight of it was nothing. I started to laugh. It wasn't a happy sound. It was cold and sharp and humorless. It was the sound of a chain snapping. They both stared at me, their confident smirks faltering. They had expected tears, pleading, surrender. They had never, in my entire life, heard me laugh at them. The bigger picture, I said, my voice dangerously quiet. Let's talk about the bigger picture, Dad. I took a step forward into the light, claiming the space between us. You really think I don't know? You think I'm that stupid girl you've always told me I am? I saw a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. You think I don't know about Project Ephesus? The name hit them like a physical force. Daniel flinched. My father's jaw tightened. You think I don't know about you stealing Mom's inheritance with a forged will while she was dying? I continued, my voice rising, each word a hammer blow. You think I don't know about you and Daniel embezzling millions from your own employees' pension fund? People who trusted you? I looked my father directly in the eye, all the fear I'd ever had of him gone. I am not the disappointment here. I am a captain in the United States Army. I am a mother. I am my mother's daughter. You, I said, my voice dropping to a low, searing whisper. You are a thief. And a liar. I held his gaze, pouring every ounce of my newfound strength into it. And I will not be silent anymore. If you have ever had that one moment where you finally stood up and spoke your truth to someone who always put you down, hit the like button and write "I am not silent" in the comments to stand with me. I didn't wait for a response. There was nothing more to say. I turned my back on them, on the years of pain, on the two men standing stunned and speechless at the altar. I walked up that aisle, not as a fleeing daughter, but as a soldier heading to the front lines. The sunlight through the stained glass window felt warm on my face. I left the chapel, leaving them in stunned silence. My battle had just begun. Leaving the chapel, I didn't feel victorious. I felt hollowed out, drained. The confrontation had been a necessary amputation, cutting away the gangrenous limb of my family. Now the real work began. I drove straight back to Arlington, to the one safe harbor I had left, Evelyn Reed's law office. The battle for my soul was over. The battle for justice was about to begin. When I walked in, Evelyn took one look at my face and put a kettle on without a word. She knew. An hour later, we were no longer in her office, but in a sterile, anonymous conference room in a federal building in downtown D.C. Across the table from us sat Special Agent Lewis of the FBI's Financial Crimes Division. He was a tall, serious man in his late 40s with tired eyes that told me he'd seen every kind of greed and corruption imaginable. He was exactly the man Mark had told me to find. "Captain Collier," he said with a nod, "I'm glad you called." With Evelyn at my side, I laid it all out. The two flash drives, Mark's original and the one he'd left with Evelyn, were placed in the center of the polished table. I played the audio recording of Mark's message. I handed over the copy of my mother's real will and the trust fund documents. Evelyn walked him through the legal fraud of Project Ephesus, while I detailed the timeline of events, from the Thanksgiving dinner to the explosion to the manipulative phone call. I delivered my report with the cool, factual precision of an intelligence briefing, keeping the raw emotion locked down. Lewis listened intently, his expression unreadable. He plugged the drives into a secure FBI laptop and his eyes scanned the contents. He scrolled through the spreadsheets detailing the pension fund embezzlement, his jaw tightening. He read Mark's notes on the bought and paid for lawyer, accountant, and judge. When he was done, he looked up, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of something other than professional weariness in his eyes. It was the grim satisfaction of a hunter who has finally cornered his prey. "For over a year, we've been monitoring Collier Consulting," Lewis said, leaning back in his chair. "We knew there were financial irregularities, kickbacks from subcontractors, but your father is a master at hiding his tracks. He's a respected Marine colonel, a legend in the DC defense community. We had smoke, a lot of it, but we could never find the fire." He tapped a finger on the laptop screen, on the folder labeled Ephesus. "Captain, this is the smoking gun." The validation in those words was so powerful it almost brought me to my knees. It was real. I wasn't crazy. The fight hadn't been for nothing. Suddenly, the adrenaline that had been fueling me for the past 48 hours evaporated, leaving behind a profound, bone-deep exhaustion. Back in Evelyn's quiet office, the reality of it all crashed down on me. I sank into the chair, the weight of the betrayal, the fear for Mark, the confrontation with my father, all of it threatening to pull me under. Evelyn placed a steaming cup of Earl Grey tea in my hands, her touch firm and steady. "Your mother would be so proud of you, child," she said softly. My eyes fell on a book sitting on the corner of her desk. It was Daring Greatly by Brené Brown. I'd read it years ago, but one line came back to me with stunning clarity. "Vulnerability is not weakness. It's our greatest measure of courage." All my life, I had tried to be strong in the way my father defined it. Stoic, unemotional, tough. I had hidden my hurt, my unfeminine ambitions, my vulnerabilities. I had stayed silent to avoid his judgment, to avoid being called a disappointment. But I realize now that my silence hadn't been strength. It had been fear. Exposing my family's toxic truth, laying bare the ugliest, most painful parts of my life for the world to see, that was my greatest vulnerability. And according to Brené Brown, it was also the bravest thing I could possibly do. I was silent for too long. I said, more to myself than to Evelyn, because I was afraid of what they would call me. I looked up at her, a new strength solidifying within me. But Brené Brown is right. Telling the truth is courage. I'm done being weak. Evelyn smiled, a small, fierce smile. Good. Then let's make a plan. For the next hour, we became a war council. The three of us, the soldier, the lawyer, and the Fed, mapped out the endgame. The strategy was a three-pronged attack. First, Agent Lewis and his team would secure a warrant to raid the Collier Consulting headquarters in Tyson's Corner. Second, Evelyn would file an emergency injunction to freeze all of my father's and Daniel's personal and corporate assets, based on the evidence of the fraudulent will and embezzlement. The final piece was the key to making the charges stick. We need a star witness to walk the jury through these documents, Lewis said. We need Mark's testimony. A cold knot of fear tightened in my stomach. We don't know where he is. They're hunting him. Agent Lewis held up a hand. About that, he said, and a small smile touched his lips for the first time. Mark is safe, Allie. He's in a secure FBI safe house. The breath I'd been holding for 2 days rushed out of me in a ragged sob. Relief, so potent and overwhelming, flooded through me, and I finally let the tears fall. He was alive. He was safe. Lewis continued gently. He made contact with us the moment he got clear of the blast. He knew your father would try to frame him, and he knew they'd be monitoring his devices. He couldn't risk calling you directly. He had to go dark. He leaned forward, his expression serious. He told us about the drives. He said he had given the key to you. He was waiting, Allie. He was betting on you to get the evidence out and bring it to us. He looked me straight in the eye. He knew you were strong enough to do this part on your own. The words landed, not just in my ears, but in my soul. He hadn't abandoned me. He had trusted me. In a world where my own father saw me as a disappointment, my husband saw me as a capable, equal partner, a soldier he could count on to complete the mission. My tears stopped. My resolve hardened into steel. My father and brother just called an emergency board meeting for tomorrow morning, I said, my voice clear and cold, to announce that Mark is a fugitive and to consolidate their control of the company. Lewis and Evelyn exchanged a look. The trap was set. They thought they were calling a board meeting to seize power. They had no idea they were walking right into our ambush. The next morning, the stage was set. The Collier Consulting headquarters in Tyson's Corner occupied the top floor of a gleaming glass tower, a monument to my father's ambition. I sat with Evelyn in a coffee shop across the street, watching the key players arrive. First, Mr. Abernathy, the family lawyer, then Cynthia Shaw, the chief accountant, then Judge Reeves. The rats, obediently gathering for a meeting they thought would enrich them. Finally, a black Lincoln Town car pulled up, and my father and Daniel stepped out. They strode into the building with the unshakable confidence of kings entering their court, ready to formalize their coup. They had no idea they were walking into a cage. Agent Lewis and his team were already in position on the floor below, waiting for our signal. My heart was a hammering drum against my ribs, a frantic, wild rhythm. But on the outside, I was perfectly still. I had spent the night before meticulously pressing my Army service uniform, the formal Class A's, with the jacket, the ribbons, the polished brass. It was my armor. Today, I would not be Allie Collier, the disappointing daughter. I would be Captain Collier of the United States Army, and I would remind my father what true honor looked like. It's time, Evelyn said, her voice calm and steady. We stood up, leaving our unfinished coffees on the table, and walked across the street to the tower. We waited in the hallway outside the main boardroom, listening. My father's voice, amplified by a speaker system, boomed through the heavy oak doors. He was in the middle of his performance, painting a picture of betrayal for the board members. A tragic situation, he was saying, his voice resonating with false gravity. My son-in-law, Mark, a man we welcomed into our family, has abused our trust in the most profound way. The evidence of his embezzlement is clear. The explosion at my home was a desperate act to destroy records, and he has manipulated my own daughter into joining him on the run. That was our cue. I pushed the doors open. The entire room fell silent. All 20 board members, a sea of expensive gray and navy suits, turned as one to stare. My father froze mid-sentence, his mouth slightly agape. Daniel's face contorted, first with shock, then with pure rage. I walked slowly into the room, my polished shoes clicking rhythmically on the marble floor. I was in full uniform, the ribbons on my chest a stark contrast to the corporate logos and power ties surrounding me. I stopped at the foot of the long, polished conference table. "Forgetting to invite me, Dad?" I asked, my voice dangerously calm. His shock curdled into fury. "Allison, you have no right to be here. Security." "I believe I do." A new voice cut in. Evelyn Reed stepped into the room behind me, a leather briefcase in her hand. She radiated a tough, unshakable authority that even my father couldn't ignore. "I am Evelyn Reed, the legal executor of the late Catherine Collier's estate." She looked around the room, making eye contact with every single person. "And as the representative of her 30% share in this company, my client most certainly has a right to be here." A shocked murmur rippled through the room. My mother's shares were supposed to have been absorbed, controlled by my father. Their faces told the whole story. "This is absurd," Daniel snarled, taking a step towards me. "Get her out of here." I held up my hand and the room fell silent again. All eyes were on me. This was my stage now. "This meeting isn't about Mark," I announced, my voice clear and ringing, carrying to every corner of the room. "This meeting is about Project Ephesus." I saw Abernathy and Shaw flinch at the name. My father's face went pale. "It's about the $15 million I said, pointing directly at my father. "And you," I added, shifting my gaze to Daniel. "Embezzled from your own employee's pension fund. It's about the fraudulent will you created to steal my mother's inheritance while she lay dying. It's about fraud. It's about theft. It's about honor." "You shut your mouth!" Daniel lunged, his face a mask of primal rage, his hand reaching for me. He never made it. "That's far enough, Mr. Collier," a calm voice commanded from the doorway. The boardroom doors swung fully open. Agent Lewis stepped inside, flanked by 2 other FBI agents, their jackets open to reveal their sidearms and badges. The board members gasped, shrinking back in their chairs. "No," Lewis said, his voice cutting through the tension like a razor. He looked directly at my father. "Colonel Robert Collier, you are under arrest for wire fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy." 2 agents moved swiftly toward my father, who stood frozen, his face a grotesque mask of disbelief and fury. The other agents intercepted Daniel, spinning him around and cuffing his hands behind his back with brutal efficiency. The sound of the handcuffs clicking shut echoed in the stunned silence of the room. My father didn't look at the agents. He didn't look at the horrified board members. He looked at me. His eyes were filled with a hatred so pure, so venomous, it was almost stunning. "You," he hissed, the word filled with a lifetime of venom. "You did this. You destroyed this family." "No." The voice came from behind the FBI agents, and a figure stepped out into the room. It was Mark. His arm was in a sling, his face bruised, but his eyes were clear and steady as he looked at my father. "You did that to yourself," Mark said, his voice quiet but firm for everyone to hear. He came to stand beside me, a solid, unwavering presence. "Allie didn't destroy anything." He took my hand, his grip warm and strong. "She just chose not to cover for your crimes anymore." The great Colonel Robert Collier, the legend, the patriarch, finally broke. His shoulders slumped in defeat as the agents led him away. Daniel was right behind him, muttering curses under his breath. The room was left in a state of utter shock. The remaining board members looking at each other, at me, at the ruins of the company they had hitched their wagons to. It was over. The truth had finally exploded into the light. The takedown in the boardroom wasn't an end. It was the detonation. The days that followed were the fallout, a slow, toxic cloud of scandal that settled over everything. The story was front-page news. I remember seeing the headline on the front of the Washington Post, held up in a newsstand window. "Local war hero, son arrested in multi-million-dollar fraud scheme." The picture below it was of my father in his dress uniform, a photo from a decade ago. A symbol of honor placed directly above the story of his absolute disgrace. The Collier name, once a fortress of respectability in Northern Virginia, was now a ruin. Just like the house in Fairfax. The legal machine ground on. Evelyn, a lioness in the courtroom, had successfully frozen every asset they owned. The employees whose pensions had been stolen were being made whole. Daniel, stripped of his arrogance, had taken a plea deal, turning on my father in a desperate attempt to save himself. It was all happening, just as we had planned. But there was one final piece of business I had to attend to, not for legal reasons, but for my own. My therapist, a kind woman who had helped me navigate the initial shock, had advised it. "You don't need his apology, Allie," she had told me. "You just need your closure." So I went. The Fairfax County Adult Detention Center was a cold, concrete place that smelled of bleach and despair. The visiting room was a line of booths separated by thick, scratched plexiglass. I sat down and waited. When he walked in, the sight of him was jarring. The tailored suits were gone, replaced by a baggy, bright orange jumpsuit. The confident stride of the colonel was gone, replaced by the slow shuffle of an inmate. But when he sat down and picked up the phone receiver, the look in his eyes was unchanged. It was the same cold, appraising stare. There was no remorse. There was only strategy. He spoke first. "I knew you'd come." I didn't answer. I just looked at him, trying to see the father I'd once worshipped. He was gone. Maybe he had never been there at all. "There's still a way out of this, you know," he said, his voice a low, conspiratorial murmur. "For the family. For the company." He leaned forward, his eyes intense. "You can still save me. Save us." I felt a weary, sad disbelief. Even here, stripped of everything, he was still trying to manipulate me. "You tell them Mark forced you," he continued, laying out his insane plan. "Tell them he was abusive, that he coerced you into this. You were unstable, grieving your mother, not thinking clearly. We can paint him as the villain, salvage the company's reputation. We can still fix this, Allison." He actually believed it. He believed that after everything he had done, the theft, the lies, the betrayal, that my loyalty should still belong to him. He believed I would sacrifice my husband, my integrity, and my own sanity to save the precious Collier name. The sheer, breathtaking narcissism of it was the final confirmation I needed. The man sitting in front of me was a stranger. I took a slow, deep breath, the last vestiges of a daughter's hope leaving my body with that exhale. I was finally free. I looked him straight in the eye, my gaze clear and steady. "No," I said, my voice quiet, but carrying through the cheap plastic receiver with absolute finality. "There is no us. There is no fixing this. I didn't come here to save you, Dad. I came here to say goodbye." He stared at me, his mouth falling slightly open, genuinely shocked that his puppet was refusing to dance. "I spent 38 years of my life twisting myself into knots, trying to earn your approval. Trying to be worthy of your love," I continued, the words coming easily now. A truth I had waited a lifetime to speak. "I joined the army to make you proud. I tried to be the perfect daughter. I stayed silent when you and Daniel belittled me, because I thought that's what family did. But I'm done now." I let the words settle in the space between us. "You told me in the chapel that I have always been a disappointment to you." I gave him a small, sad smile. "Well, here's the truth. I am not your disappointment. You are my disappointment." I saw the flicker of rage in his eyes, the mask of the calm manipulator finally cracking. But it didn't matter anymore. His anger had no power over me. "Goodbye, Robert," I said, using his first name for the first time in my life. I gently placed the receiver back in its cradle, stood up, and walked away. I did not look back. That evening, Mark and I sat on the wide, welcoming porch of Evelyn's Arlington home. She'd insisted we stay with her until we found our footing. The sun was setting, painting the sky in soft shades of pink and orange. We were sipping tall glasses of sweet iced tea, the condensation dripping onto our hands. We had picked up Leo from Sarah's house that afternoon. He was now fast asleep upstairs, safe and sound. the quiet hero of a war he never knew was fought. We sat in a comfortable silence for a long time, simply breathing. We were exhausted, hollowed out, but for the first time in what felt like an eternity, we were at peace. Mark finally broke the silence, his voice soft. "This is going to take a long time to heal from, you know." I reached over and took his hand, lacing my fingers through his. His hand was warm and strong, a familiar anchor in a world that had been turned upside down. "I know," I whispered. I leaned my head on his shoulder, watching the last sliver of the sun disappear below the horizon. The fight was over. The fallout was just beginning. But as the first stars began to appear in the twilight sky, I felt a lightness in my chest I hadn't realized was missing. The crushing weight of trying to be someone I wasn't for a man who would never see me was finally gone. "But for the first time in my life," I said, my voice thick with emotion, "I feel free. I no longer have to try to be worthy of his love." A year can change everything. It's long enough for wounds to scar over, for storms to pass, and for new things to begin to grow in the scorched earth. 1 year after that Thanksgiving, my world was unrecognizable, and for the first time in my life, it was a world of my own making. The legal battles ended not with a bang, but with the quiet final thud of a judge's gavel. My father, the great Colonel Robert Collier, was sentenced to 15 years in federal prison. Daniel received 7. Their appeals were denied. Collier Consulting, the gilded monument to their greed, was dismantled, its assets liquidated to pay back the employees whose trust they had betrayed. The Collier name was now synonymous with disgrace. But I was no longer a Collier, not in the way that mattered. I was something new. With Evelyn's guidance, I took the inheritance my mother had fought to protect, along with the assets recovered in the settlement, and I gave it a new purpose. It wasn't my money to hoard, it was a legacy to be shared. We established the Collier Reed Heritage Foundation. I insisted on using my mother's maiden name, Reed, pulling her identity out from under my father's shadow and placing it front and center. Our foundation is a nonprofit dedicated to providing legal and financial aid to military families, the very people my father's greed had targeted. We help them fight foreclosures, navigate benefits, and stand up to the kind of institutional power that preys on the vulnerable. It's my mother's legacy, transformed from a shield for one into a shelter for many. We didn't stay in Fairfax. The ghosts there were too loud. Mark, Leo, and I moved away from the suffocating wealth and judgment of Northern Virginia. We found a new life in a small, quiet town nestled in the Blue Ridge Mountains, just outside of Charlottesville. We live in a normal house, a simple 2-story colonial with a big backyard and a porch swing. It's not a mansion. There is no marble or mahogany. It's just a home, filled with the sounds of Leo's laughter and the smell of coffee in the morning. It's real. I'm still Captain Collier. I didn't let them take that from me, but I requested a transfer. My work is no longer in the shadows of intelligence gathering. I now serve in a unit that focuses on ethics training and psychological support for soldiers and their families. I help them build resilience, establish healthy boundaries, and navigate the unique pressures of military life. I use my scars not as a source of pain, but as a map to help others find their way. Last week, I stood in front of a group of military spouses at a support seminar. I shared a version of my story, editing out the names and the ugliest details, but keeping the heart of the lesson intact. For a long time, I told them, I thought that having boundaries meant pushing people away, that it was a selfish act. But I learned that boundaries have nothing to do with other people. They're not walls. They're a promise you make to yourself. I looked around the room, at the faces of strong, tired, resilient women. Brené Brown says that boundaries are about keeping ourselves whole. Your worth is not determined by the rank on your spouse's uniform or by the family you were born into. It is determined by your own actions, your own integrity, and the truth you choose to live by every single day. Afterward, a young woman came up to me, tears in her eyes. I really needed to hear that today, she whispered. Thank you. In that moment, I felt a sense of purpose so profound it almost took my breath away. This was my new legacy. This was my mother's true inheritance. This morning, the three of us are doing what has become our favorite weekend ritual, hiking a trail along the Blue Ridge Parkway. The air up here is crisp and clean, smelling of pine and damp earth. Leo, now 6, runs ahead on the path, pointing out a hawk circling high above in the brilliant blue sky. Mark and I walk hand in hand, our steps falling into an easy, comfortable rhythm. We are not Collier rich anymore. We are just happy. It's a quiet, sturdy happiness built on a foundation of truth and trust. Mark squeezes my hand. Did he ever? He asks, his voice gentle. He doesn't need to finish the sentence. One letter, I reply, my eyes on the vast rolling mountains ahead. About 6 months ago. It came from the prison. What did it say? I don't know, I say. I didn't open it. I looked at him and smiled, a real, genuine smile that reached my eyes. I just wrote "Return to Sender" on the envelope and put it back in the mail. He smiled back, a look of deep, quiet pride in his eyes. There was nothing more to be said. The conversation was over. The trial was over. His hold on me was over. We reached a scenic overlook and stopped, watching Leo throw a stick for a friendly dog that had bounded up the trail. The view was endless, a rolling sea of green and blue that stretched all the way to the horizon. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with the clean mountain air. For 38 years, I had lived in the shadow of a great man, waiting for a dawn that was his to give. But standing here, with my real family, in this quiet, beautiful place, I finally understood. The dawn wasn't his to give, it was mine to create. And this new day, this new life, was just beginning. That was my journey from a long night into a new dawn. It wasn't easy, but it was mine. And I know I'm not the only one who has had to find their own light in the darkness. My story is just one of many. This channel is a place for stories like these. Stories of resilience, of drawing boundaries, and of turning pain into purpose. If my journey resonated with you, please press the like button to show your support and subscribe to join our community. Your story matters, and you are not alone. Thank you for listening. Remember, no matter how dark the night gets, you always have the strength to create your own sunrise.